Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a food that's a staple for billions around the globe: rice. Specifically, we're tackling the age-old question: brown rice versus white rice. For years, we've heard the message loud and clear: brown rice is the healthier choice. It's packed with fiber, vitamins, minerals, the whole grain hero of the pantry. Many of us have made the switch, feeling good about choosing the better option. But what if I told you there's a twist in this tale? A hidden concern lurking within that wholesome grain. Recent research, including a significant study from Michigan State University, has brought a potential food safety issue to the forefront: arsenic. Yes, arsenic. And surprisingly, studies suggest that brown rice might actually expose us to more of it than its polished white counterpart. Now, before you panic and clear out your cupboards, let's be clear. This isn't about causing alarm, but about understanding the science. The concern is primarily about long-term, chronic exposure, not the occasional bowl of rice. Even the researchers behind these studies emphasize that brown rice isn't inherently unhealthy. So, what's the real story? In this video, we'll break down exactly what arsenic is, and why it ends up in our food, especially rice. We'll explore the science behind how rice accumulates arsenic, particularly in that nutrient-rich bran layer. We'll decode the potential health risks associated with long-term inorganic arsenic exposure, paying special attention to vulnerable groups like infants and children. We'll look at the regulations, or lack thereof, around arsenic in rice. And most importantly, we'll equip you with practical, science-backed tips to reduce arsenic in your own kitchen and make informed choices about the rice you eat. Stick around as we navigate the complex world of rice, nutrition, and arsenic, helping you weigh the benefits against the risks. Alright, let's start with the basics. What exactly is arsenic, and why are we finding it in our food? Arsenic isn't some artificial chemical cooked up in a lab. It's a naturally occurring element, a metalloid, found widely distributed throughout the Earth's crust. It's in the soil, rocks, water, and even the air around us. Because it's so widespread naturally, it inevitably finds its way into the environment and subsequently into our food chain. Now, here's a crucial distinction you need to understand. Arsenic comes in two main forms: organic and inorganic. Organic arsenic compounds have arsenic bonded to carbon. You find these mainly in seafood like fish and shellfish. Generally, these forms are considered much less toxic to humans because our bodies can process and get rid of them relatively easily. And just to be clear, the term organic here refers to its chemical structure, not organically grown food. Inorganic arsenic compounds like arsenite, ACI, and arsenate, ASV, lack that carbon-arsenic bond. These are the forms typically found in contaminated soil and groundwater, and this is the form that raises health concerns. Inorganic arsenic is significantly more toxic and is classified as a known human carcinogen, meaning it can cause cancer by major health organizations like the International Agency for Research on Cancer, IIRC, the U.S. National Toxicology Program, and the EPA. When we talk about arsenic in rice, we're primarily concerned about exposure to these inorganic forms. So, how does it get into the environment in the first place? Natural geological processes like the weathering of rocks release arsenic. But human activities have significantly added to the environmental load. Things like mining, smelting metals, burning fossil fuels, and historically, the use of arsenic-based pesticides and herbicides in agriculture have all contributed to arsenic contamination in soil and water, sometimes on land later used for growing rice. Because arsenic is naturally present and its levels have been amplified by human activity, its presence in our food supply is to some extent unavoidable. Adding to the challenge, arsenic is odorless and tasteless, so you can't detect it by simply looking at or smelling your food. This is why scientific testing is so important. And remember, choosing organic rice doesn't mean it's arsenic-free. Organic crops absorb arsenic from the soil and water just like conventionally grown ones. Understanding where arsenic comes from helps us understand why it's a concern, particularly when it comes to certain foods like rice. Okay, so arsenic is in the environment, but why is rice singled out? Why does it seem to accumulate so much more arsenic than other grains like wheat or barley? The answer lies in how rice is grown and the plant's own biology. Rice plants are remarkably efficient at pulling arsenic out of the ground. Estimates suggest they can accumulate about 10 times more arsenic than other cereal crops. There are two main reasons for this: flooded paddy fields. Think about how rice is traditionally grown in flooded paddies. This waterlogged environment creates low oxygen or anaerobic conditions in the soil. Under these conditions, arsenic present in the soil becomes more chemically mobile and available for the plant to absorb. Specifically, the arsenic tends to convert into the arsenite, ACI form, which is more soluble and easily taken up by rice roots compared to the arsenate, ASV form found in drier soils. The constant bath in arsenic-containing water allows the plant to soak it up throughout its growth. Plant uptake, a case of mistaken identity. This is where it gets really interesting. Rice plants don't intentionally absorb arsenic, they essentially get tricked into it. Plants have specific transport systems to take up essential nutrients from the soil. Arsenate, ASV, is chemically similar to phosphate, so it can sneak into the roots through phosphate transporters. But the bigger issue involves arsenite, ACI, the form prevalent in flooded paddies. Arsenite happens to be chemically very similar to silicic acid, which is the form plants use to absorb silicon. Rice plants need a lot of silicon for things like strong stems and disease resistance, and they have highly efficient silicon transporters, specifically channels called OSLC1 and OSLC2, to pull it in. Unfortunately, these silicon transporters can't easily tell the difference between silicic acid and arsenite. So, as the plant eagerly takes up silicon, it inadvertently pulls in large amounts of arsenite too. This biological mimicry is a key reason why rice is such an effective arsenic accumulator compared to crops grown in drier conditions. Arsenic's hiding place, the bran layer. Once inside the plant, where does the arsenic go? It's not evenly distributed throughout the grain, and this is critical for the brown versus white rice debate. A rice grain has several layers. The outermost is the inedible hull, always removed. Then comes the bran layer, the germ, and the large starchy center called the endosperm. Brown rice is the whole grain with just the hull removed. It keeps the bran, germ, and endosperm. White rice goes through more processing, milling, and polishing, which removes the bran and germ, leaving mostly the starchy endosperm. Here's the crucial part. Research consistently shows that inorganic arsenic tends to concentrate heavily in the bran layer. Because brown rice keeps the bran, it inevitably contains higher levels of inorganic arsenic compared to white rice from the same harvest. How much higher? Estimates suggest brown rice can have up to 80% more inorganic arsenic than white rice. The MSU study we mentioned earlier found that in the US-grown rice they analyzed, inorganic arsenic made up 48% of the total arsenic in brown rice, compared to 33% in white rice. So, when brown rice is milled into white rice, the process removes the bran and germ, and along with them, a large portion of the accumulated inorganic arsenic. But, and this is the nutritional trade-off, this milling also removes most of the fiber, vitamins, and minerals that make brown rice nutritionally dense. A little more complexity speciation within the grain. To add another layer, the type of arsenic and its exact location within the bran matters. While the toxic inorganic arsenic, ACI and ASV, is concentrated in the bran, the less toxic organic form, dimethylarsenic acid, or DMA, seems to be more mobile within the plant. Some studies suggest DMA can move more easily into the endosperm, the white part of the rice. Advanced imaging techniques have even pinpointed arsenic, often bound to sulfur compounds in specific tissues within the bran like the alerone layer and nutrient transport pathways. This explains why milling reduces arsenic significantly, but doesn't eliminate it entirely. Some DMA might remain in the white part. It also helps explain why rice from different regions can have different ratios of inorganic arsenic to DMA. For example, US and European rice often have a higher proportion of DMA compared to Asian rice, possibly due to differences in soil microbes and farming practices. So, rice acts like a sponge for arsenic due to its growing conditions and biology, and this arsenic, particularly the concerning inorganic form, concentrates in the bran layer that brown rice retains. We've established that inorganic arsenic can be present in rice, especially brown rice. But what does the science actually say about the health risks? Again, we're focusing on the effects of chronic, long-term exposure, consistently consuming low levels over many years, not acute poisoning. Decades of research, much of it from populations exposed to high arsenic levels in drinking water, have linked chronic inorganic arsenic intake to a range of serious health problems. Let's break down the major concerns. Cancer. This is perhaps the most well-established risk. Inorganic arsenic is classified as a Group 1 human carcinogen, meaning it's known to cause cancer in humans. The strongest links are with cancers of the skin, urinary bladder, and lungs. There's also suggestive evidence linking it to liver, kidney, and prostate cancers. Characteristic skin changes like dark patches, hyperpigmentation, light spots, hypopigmentation, and thickened skin on palms and soles, hyperkeratosis, are considered hallmarks of chronic arsenic exposure and can sometimes precede skin cancer. Cardiovascular disease. Chronic exposure is associated with an increased risk of heart and blood vessel problems, including high blood pressure, hypertension, hardening of the arteries, atherosclerosis, reduced blood flow to the heart, ischemic heart disease, and potentially heart attacks. A scientific statement from the American Heart Association concluded that even low-level arsenic exposure contributes to cardiovascular disease risk. Diabetes. There's growing evidence linking chronic inorganic arsenic exposure, even at low to moderate levels, to an increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes. It's thought that arsenic might interfere with how our bodies produce and use insulin. Neurodevelopmental and cognitive effects. This is a major area of concern, especially for exposures happening during pregnancy and early childhood. Arsenic can cross the placenta. Studies have linked early life exposure to problems like impaired cognitive development, lower IQ scores, memory issues, and even increased risk of death from certain diseases later in adulthood, long after the exposure stops. Other health issues. The list goes on. Chronic arsenic exposure has also been implicated in respiratory problems, kidney disease, liver damage, neuropathy, effects on blood cells like anemia, immune system problems, and adverse pregnancy outcomes. How does arsenic cause harm? So how does arsenic actually wreak havoc in our bodies? It interferes with fundamental cellular processes in several ways. Oxidative stress. It ramps up the production of harmful molecules called reactive oxygen species, ROS, which damage cells and DNA. Enzyme interference. Arsenic, especially the arsenite form, binds to crucial parts of enzymes, sulfhydryl groups, shutting down their function. This disrupts vital processes like energy production, sometimes called arsenolysis, and DNA repair. DNA damage, genotoxicity. It can directly damage our DNA or interfere with the machinery that repairs DNA, leading to mutations that can contribute to cancer. Epigenetic changes. Arsenic can alter how our genes are expressed without changing the DNA sequence itself. These epigenetic changes can have long-lasting effects and contribute to disease. Endocrine disruption. Emerging evidence suggests arsenic can mess with our hormones, potentially affecting growth, development, and metabolism. Our bodies do try to fight back through a process called methylation, mainly in the liver, converting inorganic arsenic into forms, like MMA and DMA, that are generally less toxic and easier to excrete in urine. However, this process isn't perfect. Some intermediate forms created during methylation can be highly toxic. Plus, how well we methylate arsenic varies a lot between people due to genetics and nutritional factors. This means some individuals might be more susceptible to arsenic's effects than others, even at similar exposure levels. Why infants and children are more vulnerable. The research consistently highlights infants and young children as being particularly vulnerable to arsenic's effects. Why? Higher intake, relative to body weight. Babies and kids eat and drink much more per pound or kilo of body weight than adults. So, if a food like rice contains arsenic, their dose is proportionally higher. Rice cereal is often a first food, potentially leading to significant early exposure if arsenic levels are high. Developmental sensitivity. Their bodies and brains are rapidly developing, making them more susceptible to damage from toxins. Their detoxification systems might also be less mature. Longer time for effects to show. They have a whole lifetime ahead, allowing more time for long-term effects like cancer to develop from early exposures. Studies show early life arsenic exposure can increase disease risk decades later. Less varied diets. Infants and toddlers often eat a smaller range of foods. If rice products are a major part of that limited diet, the arsenic contribution can be substantial. The MSU study specifically flagged the potential risk for children under 5, suggesting their daily intake from rice could exceed levels previously considered safe. Dietitian Sherry Coleman Collins noted that their smaller size makes even small amounts potentially more dangerous. This heightened vulnerability is why we see stricter guidelines or limits for arsenic in foods specifically made for babies and young children. Given these health concerns, especially for kids, what's being done to regulate arsenic levels in rice? Are there rules in place to keep us safe? The answer is, it's complicated, and it varies depending on where you live. Setting limits for something like inorganic arsenic is tricky because it's a naturally occurring genotoxic carcinogen, meaning there might not be a truly safe threshold. Regulators have to balance protecting health with the reality that arsenic is in the environment and the economic feasibility of meeting strict limits. This often leads to approaches like setting action levels or using risk assessment tools like the margin of exposure (MOE) rather than absolute safe daily intakes. A low MOE signals a potential health concern, which is what the European Food Safety Authority (EFSA) has repeatedly found for dietary arsenic exposure in Europe. Let's look at the different regulatory landscapes. International Standard, Codex Alimentarius. This body, run by the UN's FAO and WHO, sets international food standards. They've established maximum levels, mLs, for inorganic arsenic in rice-polished white rice 0.2 milligrams per kilogram, or 200 parts per billion, ppb. Husked, brown rice 0.35 milligrams per kilogram or 350 ppb. These are important benchmarks, but they are generally non-binding recommendations that countries can choose to adopt. Codex also provides guidance on farming practices to reduce arsenic. European Union, EU. The EU has taken a stricter approach with legally binding maximum levels for inorganic arsenic in various foods, including rice. Their limits are often lower than Codex white rice, non-parboiled, 0.15 milligrams per kilogram, 150 ppb. Brown rice and parboiled rice, 0.25 milligrams per kilogram, 250 ppb. Rice for infant young child food, a stricter limit of 0.1 milligrams per kilogram, 100 ppb. United States, US. The situation in the US is quite different. Drinking water. The EPA has a strict enforceable limit of 10 ppb for total arsenic in public drinking water. Infant rice cereal. The FDA has issued guidance recommending an action level of 100 ppb, 0.1 milligrams per kilogram, for inorganic arsenic. Crucially, an action level is not a legally binding limit like in the EU. It's guidance for the industry, and levels above it can trigger FDA scrutiny, but aren't automatically illegal. The good news is that FDA data shows the industry has made progress, with 76% of infant cereals tested in 2018 meeting this level, up from 36% earlier. General rice, white or brown, and other foods. Here's the key difference. Currently, there are no federal, legally binding limits for arsenic in regular rice or most other foods in the US. While the FDA monitors levels and has initiatives like Closer to Zero for baby foods, the lack of enforceable standards for the rice most people eat is a significant gap compared to the EU. California's Prop 65 does have guidance levels for warning purposes, 80 ppb for white, 170 ppb for brown rice. So, we have a patchwork of regulations. The EU has binding limits, while the US relies more on non-binding guidance, particularly for infant cereal, leaving general rice consumption largely unregulated at the federal level. This puts more responsibility on consumers in the US to be aware and take steps to minimize their own exposure. Knowing that regulations vary and might not cover all rice products, what can you do in your own kitchen to reduce the amount of arsenic you consume from rice? Thankfully, science offers some practical strategies, although they often involve a trade-off with nutrient retention. Let's look at the effectiveness of different cooking methods. Rinsing raw rice. Many of us were taught to rinse rice until the water runs clear. Does it help with arsenic? The evidence suggests not much. Studies, including research by the FDA, show that rinsing typically removes only about 10 to 15% or less of the inorganic arsenic. While some studies report slightly higher removal with very thorough rinsing, the consensus is that rinsing alone isn't very effective for arsenic. Worse, rinsing washes away valuable water-soluble nutrients like B vitamins, thiamine, niacin, folate, and iron, especially from enriched white rice. So, the small arsenic reduction might not be worth the nutrient loss. Cooking with excess water, the pasta method. This is a well-documented technique. Cook your rice in a large volume of water, think 6 to 10 or even 12 parts water to 1 part rice. Like you cook pasta and then drain the excess water at the end. Studies show this can remove a significant amount of inorganic arsenic, ranging from 30% up to 60%. The arsenic leaches into the cooking water, which you then discard. But there's a major downside. This method also leaches out a lot of water-soluble nutrients. Significant losses of minerals like potassium, magnesium, and manganese as well as B vitamins and iron have been reported. Parboiling with absorption method, PBA. Recognizing the nutrient loss problem with the excess water method, researchers at the University of Sheffield developed a home-friendly technique called PBA. Here's how it works. Bring water to a boil. About 4 cups water per 1 cup rice. Add your rice and parboil it for 5 minutes. Drain the rice, discarding that water, which contains leached arsenic. Add fresh water, usually 2 parts water to 1 part rice. Cover the pot and cook on low heat until the water is absorbed. Studies show this PBA method is highly effective, removing around 54 to 58% of inorganic arsenic from brown rice and 73 to 74% from white rice. The crucial advantage? Research indicates it preserves significantly more nutrients, like key minerals, compared to the excess water method. This makes PBA a very promising option for reducing arsenic without sacrificing too much nutrition. Other considerations. Soaking rice for several hours or overnight before cooking might help reduce arsenic further, especially when combined with other methods, but data varies. Steaming seems less effective than boiling. Using a coffee percolator to continuously pass hot water through rice can remove a lot of arsenic, up to 85%, but isn't very practical. And critically, the arsenic level in your cooking water matters. If your tap water is high in arsenic, cooking rice using absorption methods, like standard cooking or PBA, can actually cause the rice to absorb more arsenic. In that case, the excess water method, where you discard the water, offers better protection. Beyond the kitchen, your choices at the grocery store can also play a role. Where was it grown? Arsenic levels vary geographically. Rice from the U.S. South Central states might carry higher risk due to historical pesticide use. Rice from South Asia, like Bangladesh, India, often tests higher due to contaminated groundwater rice grown in California. On the other hand, often has lower levels. But remember, levels can vary even field to field, so origin isn't a perfect guide. What variety is it? Different rice varieties accumulate arsenic differently. Aromatic types like basmati, from India, Pakistan, and jasmine, from Thailand, generally test lower US-grown sushi rice also tends to be lower. Some studies suggest arboreal might be higher. Does organic mean less arsenic? No. As we mentioned, organic farming doesn't control the arsenic already in the soil or water. Organic rice can have arsenic levels similar to, or sometimes even higher than, conventional rice. The golden rule: dietary diversity. Perhaps the single most effective strategy, echoed by experts and dietitians, is dietary diversity. Don't rely solely on rice. Incorporate a wide variety of other grains into your diet. Think quinoa, barley, oats, buckwheat, farro, millet, amaranth. These grains generally contain much lower levels of arsenic. Diversifying not only lowers your potential arsenic exposure from rice, but also gives you a broader range of nutrients. So, after all this information, we arrive back at the central question: brown rice or white rice? What's the final verdict? Let's quickly recap the core conflict. Brown rice. Whole grain, more fiber, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants. Linked to benefits like better blood sugar control, reduced diabetes risk, and potentially better heart health and weight management compared to refined grains. But it contains significantly more inorganic arsenic because the arsenic accumulates in the bran layer it retains. White rice lower in inorganic arsenic because the bran is removed, but it's also lower in fiber and many essential nutrients. The higher arsenic content in brown rice definitely complicates the simple brown is always better message. Some reviews even question if the net health impact is positive when arsenic is factored in. Brown rice also contains more phytic acid, which can slightly reduce mineral absorption from that meal, though it's usually not a concern in a varied diet. What do the experts say? When we look at the advice from researchers, health organizations, and dietitians, a balanced perspective emerges. Don't necessarily ditch brown rice, for most adults. Experts, including the MSU researchers, generally don't recommend completely eliminating brown rice if you enjoy it. For most adults, eating it in moderation as part of a varied diet, the risk from typical consumption levels is considered low. Variety is your best friend. This is the most crucial takeaway. Diversify your grains. Mix it up with oats, quinoa, barley, etc. This minimizes cumulative exposure to any potential contaminant in a single food. Make informed choices and use mitigation. Understand the trade-off. If you choose brown rice for its nutrients, consider using arsenic-reducing cooking methods like the PB8 technique to lower the risk while preserving more nutrients. Be extra cautious with kids. Stricter precautions are wise for infants and young children. Limit their overall intake of rice products, cereals, snacks, rice milk. Prioritize diverse foods early on. Consider lower arsenic white rice or varieties like basmati jasmine, and definitely use arsenic-reducing cooking methods if serving rice often. Pregnant individuals should also focus on dietary variety. Consider culture and practicality. For cultures where rice is central, advice needs to be realistic. Focus on reduction and diversification, not necessarily elimination. The bottom line: there's no single best rice for everyone. It depends on your context. If you eat rice infrequently as part of a very diverse diet, the nutritional benefits of brown rice might outweigh the arsenic risk. If you eat rice very frequently, or you're feeding young children, you might prioritize lower arsenic by choosing white rice more often, selecting lower arsenic varieties, using cooking methods like PBA diligently, and making a conscious effort to include other grains. It's about weighing your personal priorities, nutrient density versus contaminant exposure, based on your diet, age, health, and how often you eat rice. So, to wrap things up, arsenic in rice is a real phenomenon, stemming from the natural environment and amplified by human activity. Rice, especially brown rice, accumulates inorganic arsenic due to its growing conditions and biology, concentrating it in the bran layer. Chronic exposure to inorganic arsenic carries potential long-term health risks, including cancer and cardiovascular issues, with infants and children being particularly vulnerable. But the key message isn't fear, it's empowerment. You can take steps to mitigate your exposure, choosing lower arsenic varieties like basmati or jasmine, using smart cooking methods like the parboiling with absorption PBA technique, and, most importantly, embracing dietary diversity by eating a wide variety of grains are all effective strategies. Ultimately, the choice between brown and white rice isn't black and white. It's about understanding the nuances and making informed decisions that align with your health goals and dietary patterns. Balance, moderation, and variety are your best tools. What are your thoughts on this? Did you know about arsenic in rice? Do you have any tips or experiences to share? Let me know in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more science-backed health information, and share it with anyone who might benefit. If you have significant concerns about your diet or arsenic exposure, especially regarding children, please consult with a healthcare professional or a registered dietitian for personalized advice. Thanks for watching, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next video.